Hey you guys, welcome back to Rooted Homeschool. If you're new here, I'm Christina and I'm a homeschooling mom of 5 kids ages 18 months all the way up to 13 years. This past weekend over on Instagram, I asked you guys in stories if you had any questions about homeschooling because I was getting ready to film the homeschooling in New York video for you guys. So if you had questions about homeschooling in New York or your particular state, I wanted to cover those in the video. You guys had so many good questions that I realized I needed to do a separate video to answer the questions that you all had. So if you missed the homeschooling in New York video yesterday, definitely go back and check that out. And today I'm going to address the questions that you guys had. So I actually printed them all out because I am filming on my phone. I don't have a fancy camera or anything like that, so I can't look at them and film on my phone at the same time. So I printed them out. There are so many good questions. I'm almost like each of these questions needs its own video. The first question that I want to address is, how do you know if you're doing enough? And this was from a homeschooling mom saying that she is in a state that does not have really any regulations at all in regard to homeschooling. So how do you know if you're doing enough? This is a loaded question, and again, I could do a whole video on this alone, but I want to just say you don't. Just kidding. The first question I would ask back to that is, enough according to whose standards? So the public school standards, other homeschooling moms, your own standards. If your child is learning, if your child is loving learning, if you are giving them a wide range of learning experiences, I would say you're doing enough. If your child is thriving, if they are thriving as a human, if you are a Christian, if they are thriving as a follower of Christ, then you are doing enough. So I think the first thing that you have to think about in regard to like, am I doing enough, is like, what are your priorities for homeschooling your child, right? For me, I wanted to pour into them as people. I wanted to pour into them as people of faith. I wanted to disciple them. I wanted to build them up in who God created them to be, in a situation where they weren't having to weigh that against what the world views as cool or popular or who they needed to be. I wanted them to be able to do that in a safe and, yes, sheltered environment. Yes, I want to shelter them from the things that the world wants to inundate them with. So it really depends on what your goals are. Does that mean I don't teach my kids academics? Absolutely not. But that was the number one thing for me, was to build up their confidence, to build up their self-esteem, not in a prideful way, but in who God created them to be. So that for me is my number one thing. And that's how I select what I choose to teach my children, right? So there's certain things, like depending on your state, like in New York State, I have to teach them certain subjects, right? But I would anyway, right? Would I teach them math? Absolutely. Science, of course. History, definitely. English language arts, absolutely. A little music, a little art, getting physical activity, I would do those things anyway. And I think most of you would too. So I would say, are you doing enough? Do you have to teach all of those subjects every single day to be doing enough? Absolutely not. Do you have to teach all of those subjects every single week? Absolutely not. Maybe your child gets completely engaged in a history project or a certain subject in science. Maybe you're studying earth science and they are like blown away by volcanoes. Guess what? You have the freedom as a homeschooling mom to spend that entire week studying volcanoes if you want to, doing volcano experiments, creating a model of it, watching videos about it, getting books from the library, finding mini units that are either free or cheap or whatever you want to do. So is your child learning? Are they thriving? That's how you know you're doing enough. I feel like this is a really hard question to answer, and I just want to look you in the eye and say, if you are teaching your child day in and day out, if you are following their lead, if you are noticing growth, you're doing enough. And here's the other thing. If you are bringing it before God and you are saying like, lead me to what my child needs, and you're doing that and you're following that still small voice that says, we're gonna skip math today for whatever reason. It could be because it's been super frustrating and you both need a break. It could be because they're really strong in math, but they may need a little bit of extra work in their reading. You don't need to tell them that. You could tell them, hey, we're gonna take a break from math today, but I got this really cool book from the library that I think that you would really love. I want us to take some time just hanging out on the couch or the back deck or at the park reading together. All of those things are learning. All of those things have value. So I know that's a little bit off the question. How do you know if you're doing enough? If your state has no regulations? Just keep on keeping on, mama. Do you have a curriculum, or not even just a curriculum, a plan to keep them moving and progressing in those main subject areas? Then you're doing enough. And again, is one of those main areas to disciple your child, to be doing devotions and teaching them how to pray and teaching them how to honor God and have certain character traits, then maybe you're going to spend some more time on that. If you're pulling them out of public school, like I did last year, we spent a lot of time unschooling, deschooling, and building them up. My children dealt with some self-esteem issues from being in the public school, and I'm not saying that that's the experience of every child, but for me, the priority was building up my oldest son as a middle schooler who had experienced, there's motorcycles going by, who had experienced some unpleasant things. My goal was to build him up. So kind of, I hope answered that question. Another one was, if you had to pick only one curriculum brand to use forever, which would you choose? This is a good question, like a hard question. And I'm not sure I can answer this one definitively, but I can tell you my favorites and why if I had to choose one, I would choose that one. If you've been around, you know that I love Gather Around Homeschool. I absolutely love that style of homeschool curriculum, especially for the mom who is just starting out and feels overwhelmed by having a different curriculum or a different textbook for every single subject that you have to teach your child. I think it is a great place to start, and for some people, it's a great place to stay. I would say if Gather Around Homeschool had math, it would maybe be Gather Around Homeschool. I also have recently fallen in love with The Good and the Beautiful. For many of the same reasons that I mentioned about Gather Around Homeschool. The styles are not the same. They do have some similarities, but The Good and the Beautiful has more independent levels for things like math and English language arts. And then they have science and history as family subjects. And I love family subjects. I would say the fact that The Good and the Beautiful has math, if I had to pick one curriculum company, I'd probably have to go with The Good and the Beautiful because they have math, and I am not the type of person that says, you know what, I can make up my own math curriculum. So probably The Good and the Beautiful for that reason, although I also love many of the other things that they have. So it's kind of a toss-up. I also really love My Thistles and Biscuits, and you guys know that, but it is not a complete curriculum company. She creates beautiful unit studies and resources and flashcards and like music curriculum that I just got and did a video on last week. So all of the things, those are my top three. The Good and the Beautiful, Gather Around Homeschool, Thistles and Biscuits. And then Exploring Nature with Children, but I digress. Okay, so hopefully I answered that one. Next one is, how do you keep your older boys into history and learning in general? This is a good one. I would say by allowing them to take me on rabbit trails even if I don't want to. And this is one that I've had to get used to as a former public school teacher, is I had to get away from the mindset of like, we need to get to this lesson by this date, or we need to finish these pages in this book by the end of class or by today. I had to get used to that. So if my boys wanted to have a random, what seemed like a random discussion to me in the middle of us reading a nonfiction text as part of our history curriculum, I needed to just be okay with stopping and letting them have that discussion. Even if it seems like they're going off on a rabbit trail that is unrelated, that is their brain making a connection and figuring out where in their brain they're going to connect and store that information. Now, I am not a scientist and I don't study the brain, but I do know that when I've allowed them to do that, it has kept them engaged. Not only does it keep them engaged, but it also makes them realize that like their involvement matters. This isn't just about like my plan that I have for the day, but it's about their learning, their thoughts about it, their critical thinking. So I would say if they want to draw something while you're learning about history, if they want to build something that you're learning about in history out of Legos while you're reading to them about it, or while you're playing a video about it, or whatever it is, allow them to make it their own and get them involved in the process. I don't always do the reading to them, so it also depends on how old your kids are. But like if we're reading a nonfiction text or historical fiction, which is another thing that really pulls them in and gets them excited and interested about what we're talking about, we take turns reading it. So I can tell you that the literature-based history curriculum for us has been super helpful. It has been huge in getting them really excited and interesting. Also watch related videos. If you know me and you've been around, you know I'm not a huge TV person. I'm not a huge screen time person. However, the history curriculum that we use does include links to different documentaries and videos and episodes and things like that that connect with what we're learning. I think those multiple modes that all connect to the same topic are really helpful. My kids love Hamilton, so they have learned a lot about history from watching that. We also bring in beautiful picture books that connect to the topic, and they love seeing those visuals. If you're a visual learner and you never see beautiful artwork or beautiful picture books that connect with the topic in history, there's really something missing for you as a learner. So figure out what excites them about the topic or anything related to the topic and do that. I'll give you an example. When we were studying Asia, and this was a genius idea that my husband had. Asia was our second ever homeschool unit that we did as part of Gather Round Homeschool's units last year. And my boys are really into skateboarding. And so what my husband would do to break things up, because he was helping with our homeschooling at the time, he would say, all right, let's look up skateboarding in Taiwan. Let's look up skateboarding in the Philippines, because that's what they were into. So they would find like videos or skate parks about skateboarding in that particular place. Then we would watch travel videos about that particular place, and they would see some of these landmarks that were talked about in the curriculum. So keep it creative, keep it fun, be a learner alongside with them, get excited. So hopefully that helps. All right, guys, in order for this video to not get super long, I am going to stop here and make a part 2 while I answer the last of the questions that I got from you guys. If your question was not answered today, please check back tomorrow and I will answer your question in part 2 of this Q&A. If you are new here, I would love if you would stick around and subscribe. Click that red subscribe button, click the notifications bell so you know when I have a new video coming out. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new here, introduce yourself in the comments below. If you have any questions about anything that I talked about today, definitely let me know down in the comments. I love to get to know you guys. If you are not already following me over on Instagram, you can follow me there at rooted_homeschool. And I hope to see you in tomorrow's video for part 2. Until then, stay rooted.